Welcome to episode 26, Racial Profiling. Please turn on closed captioning if it's not already on. Talking about race and racism is a very sensitive matter. Let me start out by reminding you that the views expressed in my blog are my views based on my philosophy of life, and you are free to debate their logic. But I challenge anyone to dispute the definition of racism that I gave in my blog episode 16. Racism can be said to be prejudice based on skin color, but at its core, racism is selfishness and inhumanity. The selfishness part is about humans wanting to limit sharing and therefore using a basic difference, skin color, to determine allocation. That's why racism is not confined to white people or any one race. Black people can be as racist as white people, especially some of the ones in positions of power whose selfishness and inhumanity are obvious. To me, much of the racism exhibited by the basic black person is caused by envy and anger that comes from being born into a world of black and white, where being black is a disadvantage to overcome from day one, which seems to lead to a desire to take from other races. But still, again, it's racism based on wanting to take, not to share or partake, but just to take. And so, the selfishness of racism in black people, like all racism, leads to inhumanity in speech, acts, and deeds. As I put it in episode 21, A Blended People Solution, the greatest generator of conflict and strife on this particular earth is racism. So how did we get here? I just love to travel. I love to experience different cultures, foods, and places that I've read about. Since I'm fascinated by human existence and the meaning of life, the tenet of my blog, I like history and reading about the lives of ancient peoples. A bucket list thing that I've been undertaking to visit historical sites and ancient wonders of the world was put on hold by the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, but now I hope to resume soon. Recently, I counted to myself the number of countries I've been to, and it was well over 30. I've been to 5 countries in North and Central America, 5 in South America, 5 in Western Europe, 6 in Western, Eastern, and Southern Africa, and at least 12 throughout the Caribbean. All being well, I have plans to visit countries in Southern Europe, Eastern Europe, North Africa, Central Africa, the Middle East, and multiple places in Asia over the next 2 to 3 years. One thing I've noticed in my travels is that this Earth's historical development has been such that in almost every country and culture you can think of, light-colored skin is valued more than dark-colored skin, and there is inherent discrimination against dark-skinned people. Why? Let me give my lengthy, plausible answer. My belief is that the root cause of skin color racism in today's world stems from the fact that historically conquered peoples have been viewed as weaker or inferior. There has always been conquest and slavery throughout the history of man on this earth. However, starting right after the Middle Ages, white Europeans started conquering the rest of the world and enslaving people, in particular black people, on a scale never seen before. Whether it was China or India or Africa or the Americas, white people used superior weapons of war to subdue and dominate indigenous populations. They then proceeded to establish themselves as a superior class of people in all countries around the world. Basically, white or near white skin came to be associated with superiority and dark skin with inferiority. As white people retreated from countries they had conquered, what came to distinguish the subsequent ruling classes was the color of their skin. To me, this situation appears to have developed because as white people established themselves in conquered countries, they granted their mixed race offspring special privileges and placed them in superior positions of power than those indigenous people of darker skin color. That's why even today, in countries as diverse as China, Nigeria, or Italy, indigenous people with darker skin are viewed as somehow inferior, resulting in darker skinned people in those populations being viewed negatively and suffering discrimination. This is a case in almost any former European colony you can think of, which is most of the world except perhaps for the United States and South Africa, where the white, I don't want to say rulers, but essentially that's what it is, where the white rulers never left. A major factor in local politicking that forced the retreat of Europeans from African, Central, and South American and some Asian countries was the particular aggrievement felt by mixed-race offspring of white people in those countries. Their closer interactions with white people, including in many instances benefiting from an education reserved for people of means or status, allowed them to discern that the white superiority thing was a myth and be dissatisfied with the status quo. But the nature of man and racism being what they are, once the mixed race folks assumed power, they proceeded to perpetuate the white superiority myth to maintain their privilege, since they had more white in them than the indigenous people of the land. So, in virtually all former colonies of European nations, in Africa, Asia, the Middle East, the Americas, even in the first one to become independent, Haiti, the ruling class is dominated by light-skinned people. In today's world, the white as superior thing is so ingrained psychologically and socially so as to have seemingly become a condition of the human race. Language and the specification of meaning given to words and expressions in relation to light or white things being pure and desirable, and dark or black things being bad and undesirable, have served to reinforce negative perceptions of dark-skinned people. It's no wonder that so many black people in today's society resort to bleaching their skin to make themselves look lighter. And to me, it has resulted in many cultures with peoples that are slightly off-white. Places, for example, in Eastern or Southern Europe or Asia or Latin America, harboring some of the most racist people in the world. Mankind has evolved to where lighter skin seemingly entitles the bearer to feel superior. I say evolved because it seems clear that both white and black children are conditioned into this thinking from the moment they are born. When we live in a world where light colors are associated with pleasant things and nice people, and dark colors are associated with unpleasant things and bad people, then black children are born into a world that's conditionally racist to begin with. But yes, I do believe the white superiority thing is a myth. Yes, white people have dominated this earth for centuries now. There are still scientists with the under PC cover belief that the white race as a whole is more intelligent than other races. Of course, in recent times, that notion has been challenged more and more with the intellectual achievement when given the opportunity and resources of people from China and India and now Africa. Assuming correctly, I believe that if more black people could devote their brain power to living and existing rather than surviving and overcoming, there would be far greater numbers of black people around that with what those previously referenced scientists consider to be intelligence, then the white superiority thing sort of all comes down to one basic combination type question and its answer. Let, let's get to that combination question and answer in a roundabout way. Suppose we say that the need to get this earth to a state of harmony that I spoke about in blog episodes 4 and 6 means creating an earth with only one race or people. My belief is that that's not feasible unless we are talking about a fully mixed race earth per episode 21 of my blog. And a mixed race earth needs contribution from all races. The thing is that the strife, racial and otherwise, to get to one race or people would destroy the earth before the desired uniformity could be achieved. In my opinion, such an earth would self-destruct from forever being in conflict. People fighting to prove who is that one fittest survivor with superior DNA or something. What I mean is that on such an earth where the mindset is proving superiority, it will be which race, then which people, then which ethnic group, which family, which man or woman, all the way down to which gene and something else perhaps is superior. Eventually, we might get to where a single superior champion person remains who can't get off the earth by its person self. If the person clones its person self, then you know that just means another clone war to get to the most superior clone. So, to me, trying to get to one race is just another way of getting to an earthless universe, as I talked about in my blog episode 15. Perhaps infinity's endless possibilities is of universes moving endlessly, infinitely, some without Earths. The way this earth has evolved has been along a path of conflict and strife for as long as there have been differences causing arguments between apes. As a result, we don't know how much sheer brain power this earth has lost over the years from one group of humans wiping out another group of humans. Think of how much physical wealth has been lost. Perhaps more importantly, think of how much creativity has been lost. And think of how much time has been lost and continues to be lost. It may be true that white people use superior technology to enslave black people, but another way this earth has evolved has been towards ancient peoples physically separating or being separated over time, evolving in their own spaces, and reconnecting. That might be a necessary part of evolution on any given earth. The problem on this earth has been what happens after peoples meet or reconnect. It's often in the form of one people conquering another, and even when a meeting is initially peaceful, eventually conflict develops with one people's desire to dominate the other or others. What if the ideal of evolution was actually that different peoples were to develop differently, different knowledge, and when they meet, they cooperate and they learn from each other? You see, I believe that if every human being is different, then every human being has something, some combination of characteristics for good or unfortunately bad, at which that human being is better at than anyone else on the earth at any given time. I further believe that an important part of that something is a mental characteristic that human being is better at than any other human being in the world at any given time. Of the billions of people on this earth, statistically, it's rare that the singularly best something of any particular human being is revealed. If you want to bring up sports and say it's all about physical skills, I say that while being a superior athlete is in some sports is aided by having a superior body to start out with, I know there is a mental something that a superior athlete has in greater quantities than me and a whole bunch of other people. I'm not saying that great athletes are smarter than everyone else, but to turn your body into the body of a great athlete means that you have to have something mentally that not everybody has to make a hunger or desire a reality. Clearly, as well, some athletes have that something more than others. I was watching this Manchester City versus Manchester United football game when I paused to add this and the next sentence to the draft of this blog episode. Several times the commentator essentially talked about how the Manchester City team wears down other teams mentally, or wondered whether the Manchester United team would be able to hold up mentally to stop Manchester City from scoring. And I was reminded of what I had been saying about the mental strength of athletes in this blog episode. It was the great, marvelous Marvin Hagler who once said, "It's tough to get out of bed to do road work at 5 a.m. when you have been sleeping in silk pajamas." Of course, if it's just a regular athlete, then, like with most people, we don't know what's the best at in the world something that the person has. I believe that for some human beings, that something they are best at, let's go super and say ability they are best at, is concealed by an issue. The issue could perhaps be damage to a relevant or related part of the brain caused by drugs or chemicals or malnutrition, or could be the result of a physical injury or a birth defect or age or simply the lack of opportunity. But for some human beings, the ability is brought out by an issue. Again, perhaps drugs, chemicals, or age, experience, or a birth defect that results, for example, in an autistic person being a savant at something. To me, what those autistic savants tell us is that somewhere locked away in the brain of the most ordinary of humans may be the gem of a never to be discovered ability. You know, I was reading this New York Times article called "In Favor of a More Casual, More Forgiving Polenta." Internal joke. Since the stay-at-home thing, even me start reading cooking articles in the Times. But there was this paragraph where the author, Yotam Ottolenghi, described something about cooking polenta that astounded me. It goes, "Properly done polenta requires reverence. It requires respect. It requires rules. It requires the best part of an hour spent standing at the stove, stirring in a certain direction with a certain wooden spoon until the texture is just so and it comes away from the sides of the pan just so. The result is creamy yet fully of body with a sweet and rich aroma." Well, I didn't even know what polenta was until I read the article and looked it up. Polenta is made by boiling with constant stirring a maize, which is generally cornmeal. So as I read the article, I tried to imagine myself standing for the best part of an hour stirring a pot to cook polenta. I jokingly thought to myself, only if my life depended on it. And I stopped and thought out what I just thought. I'd spend an hour standing over a hot stove stirring a pot to get properly done polenta, only for some serious compensation, or if my life depended on it. And at the same time, I was physically and mentally able to do so. In my mind, I made the connection of only if my life depended on it to that's exactly the situation faced by a slave. You know, in blog episode 1, I contemplated the question and gave examples of what is good, but actually didn't give my definition on blog episode 6, Amplified Recap. But apart from the inhumanity of the type of situation I described above faced by slaves, then to me, any good outcome of anything requires something other than forced labor. If it's cooking polenta, the reverence, respect, and rules required for a good outcome is not going to come from slave labor, but from someone like the author's father, someone who enjoys putting the labor for that good outcome. Someone who enjoys putting in the labor for that good outcome. Someone for whom it truly is a labor of love. And if we have free will, me and most other people simply won't have the capacity, don't have that something to enable us to make proper polenta. Do you get how I'm answering that fundamental question I contemplated earlier in this blog episode? Let's refocus of sorts. Per my theory, as outlined in my blog episode 6, about humans needed to get working as quickly as possible on a means to escape the earth, and that requires getting to a state of harmony as quickly as possible. Suppose we say to get to this technology-driven earth by 2021, white people had to do what they did to darker skinned people throughout the prior 400 years. I strongly disagree, because what they did has seeded a sort of strife that's now destroying this earth. To me, no doubt, if this sort of strife continues, this earth essentially evolves to destruction. What if racial strife stops now? Would it then be like curing a hurt of the heart? And if the hurt heals, then does the end justify the means? White people of professed Christian faith weren't above enslaving black people after arriving in Africa. But what if there had been cooperation instead? You say then that slavery generated the wealth for the European nations and the United States that eventually led to the Industrial Revolution and then the technological revolution that have benefited all mankind. But who knows whether cooperation might not have led to the faster development of a means, say, to pick cotton without slave labor. Just think how this earth would be now if Europe or later the United States had made fair agreements with other peoples to access the natural resources of their lands so that those peoples truly benefited. Think of a world today with no children starving. Just think of that type of earth working towards the goal of solving the problem of how to eventually escape the earth. Then think of what the enslavement of black people to generate wealth for Europe and the United States has cost this earth. Think of the three critical resources this earth has lost because of racial strife: time, monetary resources, and creativity. Think of how much more of all three of these critical elements will be lost by this earth due to racial strife. The clock is ticking. Was it worth it? You know, whenever I think of the peoples of Africa, I think too of a Thomas Gray poem, Elegy written in a country courtyard, and in particular the verse that goes, full many a gem of purest ray serene, the dark unfathomed caves of ocean bare. Full many a flower is born to blush unseen, and waste its sweetness on the desert air. You know, what with global warming and all, it would be so ironic that in a future phase of this Earth's evolution, the amount of melanin in one's skin becomes key to a person's survival and the survival of the human race on a sun-scorched planet.